Slavs. For centuries, they transformed the map of Europe. They founded kingdoms, built empires, survived invasions, and spread across one of the largest geographic areas on Earth. Today, more than 300 million people speak Slavic languages, from the Adriatic Sea to the Pacific coast of Russia. But where did the Slavs actually come from? Were they always spread across Eastern Europe, as older nationalist histories often claimed? Or did they emerge from a much smaller homeland before expanding outward in one of the biggest migrations in European history? Scientists have wrestled with that question for decades. Historians debated it. Archaeologists argued over it. Entire ideas of identity were built around it. But now, ancient DNA is finally giving us answers. And some of those answers are genuinely surprising. In this video, we're going to trace the genetic story of the Slavic migrations, from the ancient hunter-gatherers who first settled Eastern Europe, through the Bronze Age steppe expansions, to the medieval Slavic movements that reshaped half a continent. We'll look at what DNA confirms, what it changes, and why the genetic story of the Slavs is far more layered than many people expected. Today, the Slavic world stretches across a massive geographic zone. Russians, Ukrainians, Poles, Belarusians, Czechs, Slovaks, Slovenes, Croats, Serbs, Bosnians, Bulgarians, North Macedonians, and several other groups all belong to the broader Slavic family. Together, they occupy an enormous corridor running from Central Europe deep into Eurasia. And that geography matters a lot. Eastern Europe sits between major migration routes. To the west were Germanic and Celtic populations. To the south, the Balkans and the Mediterranean world. To the east, the Eurasian steppe. To the north, the forests of the Baltic. That's not incidental. It's the reason Slavic DNA became so layered. This region acted like a crossroads for thousands of years. Armies moved through it. Traders crossed it. Entire populations expanded and collapsed here. What's interesting is that despite this huge spread, Slavic-speaking populations still show a remarkable degree of genetic similarity compared to many other European groups. Scientists repeatedly noticed this pattern in genetic studies. Even populations separated by large distances often cluster surprisingly close together. There's another detail that stands out. Many Slavic populations have unusually high frequencies of certain Y chromosome lineages, especially haplogroup R1a. We'll explain why that matters later, because its story begins long before the Slavs themselves appeared in the historical record. The language clue came before the DNA. Slavic languages belong to the Indo-European language family, the same enormous linguistic family that includes English, Spanish, Persian, and Hindi. More specifically, they form part of the Balto-Slavic branch, meaning Slavic languages are especially close to Baltic languages like Lithuanian and Latvian. And here's where it gets surprising. Lithuanian preserves some extremely ancient Indo-European features that linguists believe sound closer to the original Proto-Indo-European language than almost any modern language in Europe. That connection hints that the ancestors of Balts and Slavs once lived relatively close together, probably somewhere in northeastern Europe. For a long time, scholars argued over where exactly the Proto-Slavs emerged. Some proposed the forests north of the Carpathians. Others suggested areas closer to modern Ukraine or Belarus. Language alone couldn't settle the debate. But before we get to the DNA, we need to go back much further, to the people who were here first. After the last ice age ended around 12,000 years ago, Europe slowly repopulated with hunter-gatherers moving northward into newly habitable lands. Eastern Europe looked very different then. Vast forests covered much of the region. Rivers served as highways. Human populations remained sparse. These early hunter-gatherers carried genetic profiles quite distinct from modern Europeans. Ancient DNA reveals that many had relatively dark skin pigmentation, while some also carried genes for light eyes, including blue eyes. That combination sounds unusual today, but it was surprisingly common among Mesolithic Europeans. In Eastern Europe, Archaeologists uncovered evidence from cultures like the Dnieper-Donetsk culture in modern Ukraine. These communities lived by fishing, hunting, and gathering along river systems for thousands of years. Some of their genetic signatures still survive in modern Eastern Europeans today. Then came the next great wave. Around 8,000 years ago, Neolithic farmers began moving into Europe from Anatolia, in what is now modern Turkey. They brought agriculture, domesticated animals, pottery, and permanent settlements. But here's what's interesting. In much of Eastern Europe, this farming expansion moved more slowly than it did in Western or Southern Europe. For centuries, farmers and hunter-gatherers lived side by side. They mixed gradually. In some places, hunter-gatherer ancestry remained unusually strong. Eastern Europe retained more of its older genetic layers than many regions farther west. Then came the Bronze Age. And this is where the story changes dramatically. About 5,007 years ago, steppe pastoralists associated with the Yamnaya culture expanded westward from the Pontic-Caspian steppe, north of the Black Sea. Ancient DNA studies completely transformed our understanding of this migration. Researchers from institutions like Harvard Medical School and the Max Planck Institute found that these steppe populations contributed massive amounts of ancestry to later Europeans. The Yamnaya carried high frequencies of haplogroup R1a and related lineages. They likely spread early Indo-European languages across large parts of Europe. They also brought new technologies, horse domestication, wagons, and possibly social systems built around mobile warrior elites. And that's not a small detail. Modern Slavic populations carry substantial steppe ancestry, often between 40 and 60%, depending on the region. But the Slavs themselves didn't yet exist. Instead, the region became what geneticists call a layered population, a genetic mosaic built from hunter-gatherers, early farmers, and steppe migrants, all mixing over thousands of years. One important archaeological culture here is the corded ware culture, which spread across northern and eastern Europe during the Bronze Age. Ancient burials from corded ware sites show strong steppe ancestry and strong links to later Balto-Slavic populations. The foundation was being laid long before the first Slavic kingdoms ever appeared. Then came the migrations that changed Europe. For centuries, historians debated whether the Slavs spread mainly through mass migration or cultural expansion. Early Byzantine writers suddenly began mentioning Slavic groups,